when you don't have financial security, it's just so easy to go into that downward spiral when you get anxious, when you get in those moments of like, I have nothing figured out. That's where my mind always goes in those moments when I'm stressed, is like, this is the huge part of my life that hasn't been figured out.
Welcome to Grief Chats with Dana and Mira, where we talk candidly about all things grief and widowhood.
Grief is hard. Let's talk about it.
So that's the thing with life insurance. It felt like blood money. This isn't my money. I don't want to touch this money. Like, I don't know what to do with this money.
Welcome to Grief Chats, everyone. We're going to be talking today about a very taboo subject. Somebody actually wrote us a DM and said, this is the only topic more taboo than widowhood and sexuality. And it is financial issues, financial challenges, financial losses after the loss of a spouse. It's really hard to talk about and really uncomfortable to talk about. Dana and I have been chatting for a little while here and just kind of like avoiding getting started because it's awkward.
I know.
Everyone's situation is unique. We are going to share a little bit about our own stories, but like overall, as with so many issues, it is another one that is just, we don't hear a lot of dialogue around us. And so it can often feel incredibly isolating to be dealing with all of these additional financial challenges, issues, changes, losses, and to feel that other people don't see that part of your loss and just feeling very alone.
I just want to acknowledge it. I think money in any scenario isn't talked about. Like I just feel like we were raised in the society of like, and especially as women, where it's like money is taboo. And so it's very interesting. And I feel that way very much, where it's like, we've been chatting for like 30 minutes about everything except for what we're supposed to be talking about tonight, because it is hard. And I felt a little nervous to put it all out on the table, which is why I think it's really important to talk about. And so for me, kind of who's the breadwinner, who was, in more control of the finances, and sometimes it's 50-50 and all of that. For me personally, Brad definitely made more money. He was the director of a nonprofit. And so I wouldn't say he made a ton of money, but made more than me because I had my own business and was new and trying to figure this out. And he also was in control of our finances, like had spreadsheets. He was very organized and kept track of everything. And I was just like, okay, I'm just living over here, like not having to worry about it, because that was kind of Brad's role in our relationship. So it just, after he died, it felt like a bit like on top of everything else, having to figure out how to do basic household management of finances felt really difficult. So, and not really something I ever thought about or had to prepare for, or thought I'd have to prepare for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many cognitive issues around traumatic loss anyways, and then on top of that, to be having to take on this huge cognitive task of learning how to do your own finances when you're grieving. I mean, that's really hard.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why this feels uncomfortable for me to talk about and to admit that is, as a person who considers myself to be super independent and have certainly learned a lot in the last 4 years about all of it, it's hard to admit as a woman that, I didn't really manage this at all and really didn't know what I was talking about or what I was doing, because I just like to give off this idea and this perception that, I had my shit together and could do it. And I'm like, no, I really didn't. Like, I didn't have my hand in this.
How long did it get for you to feel like you had a good grasp of it?
I'll let you know when I'm there.
Is it still like a stressful?
It's not as stressful. I feel like there's been so many changes that have happened. So certainly the first couple of years, because I was dealing with the estate and all of these things, like my house wasn't in my name, like all of these things that were tied up into finances took years, really, the estate closed this year. So it took 4 years for that to close. So it's been hard to kind of adjust for what a normal month looks like in terms of my finances, because there's just been so many things, and then taking care of my dad and moving. I feel like now I'm kind of in this stability in my life where I'm starting to understand a little bit more of what month to month looks like for me, um, which feels nice, but it feels ridiculous that it's been 4 years and I'm just now being like, okay, this is where I'm at now.
I would think it would be hard for anyone to keep up with all of those changes.
Yeah, and so I try and give myself a little bit of grace about it of, this is not normal. Like what my last 4 years have looked like are not normal for a
Totally.
30-something-year-old, so it's okay.
Not normal at all.
Right. Right. How about you, though? What was your kind of situation with Brian?
So our finances were pretty simple, which ended up being made it a lot easier for me, I think, because we didn't own. So that right there makes it really easy. We both already fully owned our vehicles. We rented. All of our money was together. I was trying to think when you were talking, I was like, which one of us was like more in charge? I was like, neither one of us were very good with money. But like it just worked out. If anything, maybe I was better than Brian. But he did have a really good sense for money. Like he just always kind of intuitively balanced it out really well.
Yeah.
It's hard to even explain, like just the way he was, but yeah, we were always okay. We didn't even have an estate. There was no estate.
Yeah.
And we did have wills, which did make things easy. My mom, bless her heart, like a few days before Brian passed, was like, I know this is the worst timing, but like, I think you guys should do wills. We'll arrange it. Like, we'll have them come to the hospital. It's going to make your life so much easier. And she was so right.
Yeah, what an amazing person to be able to do that and have the foresight to do that. Because
that's my mom, though.
I can't imagine that was easy for her to like have to have that conversation like days before Brian died.
I know. And it was so sad, like having the lawyers come to the hospital and like, we had to assess whether he was like able to cognitively do it because he was so like drowsy. My friend recently was asking me like, how did it actually help you? And I'm like, I don't think it actually helped me. It just made everything easier.
Yeah. I think when it's just like, it's there and written out, there's no question about any of it.
Whenever I went to the bank, whenever I had to go here or there, whatever, like there's the will and like no questions asked. Like it's just sort of like a free pass, I feel. Whereas other widows I know to do more steps to get there. Yeah. Which is hard when in early grief when even doing any of that is next to impossible, right? So anyways, so our situation was pretty simple, all things considered. In that area, I had it very easy. But Brian didn't have any life insurance. So both Brian and I were self-employed and worked for ourselves. And I'm actually in the process of purchasing it right now because I'm like, I need to have life insurance. Yeah. Actually, it's crazy. It's taken me 2 years. But anyway, so he did not have life insurance. He had a bunch of really good recording gear that he had invested in over the years, and he made me swear that I would sell it all, I would get his friends to sell it all. He was like, I do not save that gear, which it was actually hard because like this was gear that he had like chosen so carefully and put everything into and like all of these things that he thought of so much. And, like everything in me wanted to like keep them all for Dee if she wants to like record too or whatever. Anyways, but no, he made me swear up and down I would sell it all. So that kind of like has helped things along. But I have lost all interest in my career, essentially. That's the bigger thing for me. So it's like, it's so hard to explain because it's like, yes, of course, I lost like his income. I lost. Also, the big thing for us in terms of finances was that we didn't pay for childcare. Childcare in Toronto was also insanely expensive. So we both worked part-time because we were self-employed and my mom helped out too so that we were working like more than just half. Yeah. And then we both kind of had Davida for other days. So she was always with either Brian, me, or my mom. And so we weren't paying for any childcare at all. And then for me to suddenly be on my own, I've lost his income. Even if I did want to return to my work from before, then I'd be paying for childcare on my own. I'd be paying for our entire rent on my own. Like there's no way. But then on top of that, I also like had no interest in my job. And I still haven't gone back to my job. But since I run a business, I've been able to still have money coming in doing just like the admin and marketing and stuff like that from home. But I haven't actually, so I'm an occupational therapist, but I haven't actually seen a client since Brian died. which is like crazy. Like Brian would not believe it. Like I was so into my job. This company was my baby before I had a baby. I was obsessed with it. I worked such long hours over the years, like put everything into it. We had such big dreams. Like it's crazy that I can't even, I don't know. It's just, there's something about it that I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is.
I feel like that's got to be common, and I wonder how many other people, like, that's another one of those silent losses that it's like,
Totally.
the things that you love to do. And yeah, sometimes it's your career and it's the thing that you make money. You're just like, I can't, I can't go back to it in the same way. And for whatever reason, but I felt that way too. And I just wonder if I'd imagine that's pretty common, that feeling.
I think so. And I think it's a combination of things. Like, I think it's partly that job is a huge trigger for me now because it just reminds me so much of my life with Brian. It brings up so much. And then just, yeah, feeling like your identity is shifted and the old job doesn't necessarily fit the way that it did before.
Yeah, definitely.
I've sort of like managed to piece things together, like randomly. Things have sort of fallen into place that have allowed me to get by. I feel very privileged in my financial situation, which I know is like a weird thing to say considering I didn't have life insurance and I'm an only parent and like a lot of people probably feel sorry for me. But I feel like just the fact that I have a master's education, I have the privilege of like being brought up a certain way and getting access to a certain education and knowing that when I desperately absolutely need to, I can get a job and I can make money. And that is a privilege. And I have had the privilege of, even though it has been very stressful, it is honestly such a privilege to like be able to not be working full time, like right out of a loss. I got that grant from the Canada Council for the Arts to write, which was a lifesaver. Just kind of things like that fell into place. But
do you worry moving forward now? Because I feel like it has been these like different chunks that have come and, part of me is like, yeah, you just trust the universe and trust that this will keep like falling into place and these opportunities will happen. But do you worry about it? Like, is it a pretty consistent fear, now that, you had this grant and that's for a certain amount of time and what's to come next or what you're going to do?
It's interesting. I do worry about it sometimes, but I think truly in my heart of hearts, like when I really like sink down into my trusting and knowing, I think it will work out. But I do think that is because I do live with a lot of privilege of, I've never been in a financial trauma situation. I don't have any of that in my history. I also built this other company already. So I kind of have that sort of in my back pocket too of like, okay, how to kind of build something. If I decide to be like self-employed again, which I probably will. So it's all tied up together because like when I put Davida in preschool, which was in November before the pandemic, so this was like 8 months after Brian's death, I put her in preschool and I was like, I'm going to start figuring out work stuff now. And then I had a few months of like, I gave myself a few months to like have a little bit of time without her and, before I really pushed myself, and then the pandemic hit. And then I was alone with her all the time. And then even this past year, even though she could have gone to school, it would have meant giving up access to all her grandparents. And I also wasn't like, it was a bunch of factors, but that was a big part of it. And so a big part of it for me in terms of my being able to work has been that I've been with Davida all the time. And it's been hard to figure that piece out with her around with me constantly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The thing that's the weirdest is I'd spent years building a company, things up and down and all over the place and just like the regular things of building your own thing from nothing. And then it was finally really going kind of well, and it was like, oh, things are like, I really felt like that last year, 2018 was the first year when I was like, all right, like it was really worth it, like I'm making more money than I would be making had I taken a hospital job, a 9 to 5 in this, because OT is regulated. So you know exactly what we get paid, but then it's like, it all just like, boom, and I had to give up our home. That's just the craziest thing, is like going from being in a place when you're not having to be like just so month to month to being back.
Yeah, we feel secure.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, an instant, it all shift.
Yeah. And I mean, money is really like, people say like money is stability. And like that is what it feels like, because it's like maybe it's like a false sense of stability, because as you and I know, anything can happen regardless of how much money you make. Although there are better access to probably different treatments and things if you have money.
Yeah.
But anyways, regardless of how much money you have, like if death is going to come to call, it's going to come to call, So I don't know, but money does give you like a certain sense of
yes, there is a level of stability and security that comes with money.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can't totally save your life, but
my stability, like part of me feeling so unstable since Brian died, has to do with this big element that used to feel very stable, now not being stable at all.
Yeah.
And also because it connects to home, and it connects to, me caring for Davida, and like it's all connected. So yeah, money is a huge part of widowhood.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you're right, because it is wrapped up in so many things, in your home and the life you had before, and your security and just your emotional, mental security and stability. Like it's all under this umbrella.
Yeah. One thing I know we wanted to talk about is, because I was saying before we started the episode that for someone like me who didn't have life insurance, feels like this, oh my gosh, if only kind of, like if I had life insurance then, or if Brian had life insurance, then I wouldn't have any financial woes and everything would be so easy. And what I've learned is that isn't always the case. I was telling Dana, like I was interested to see that 80% of people we polled said that they had financial stressors and challenges since their partner had died, but only how many percent was it that
it was about 60% did have life insurance.
A significantly larger percentage of people have had financial stressors than just those that don't have life insurance.
Right.
So obviously there's a lot of stressors involved in the scenario where you do have life insurance too. And I think you were going to speak about that a little bit.
Yeah. So for me, Brad did have life insurance, something through his job, and going back to the will, when you were talking about with Brian and your mom in the hospital room. So we did something similar where his best friend is a lawyer and basically was like, let's just write this. And Brad was also kind of in and out on all kinds of pain meds. And I think it's questionable whether or not that will should have been valid. And there's all kinds of things that I feel like I could talk forever about this, and I'm not going to dig deep in this conversation. But looking back, I'm like, maybe this will should have just been invalidated from the start, and it would have saved me a lot of problems.
Really?
But we thought having the will would make it easy. But for us, because we didn't have anyone write a will, our friend wasn't an estate attorney, and so really didn't know what he was doing, found like a standard will online, and we filled it out, and including Brad, like all of Brad's wishes, which is like give my nieces and nephews like whatever amount Dana decides, and the school we graduated from, like, and again, whatever Dana decides, and there wasn't like a lot of concrete language in it, which is really bad in a will. Like if you're not specific, it means that all those people mentioned had like a right to all of my financial information. So the university we went to, so our siblings and their children got copies of like every piece, because they could come and like have a claim at the will and at the assets, and it became the most complicated,
oh my gosh,
pain in the ass scenario.
Yeah. No kidding.
So I'm like, have a will. I think in 90 something percent of the cases, it's great, but like have someone that knows what they're doing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because the first thing that I met with another lawyer, an estate lawyer, after was like, it would have been better if you had no will. Like you've just made your life so much more complicated. I mean, I ended up having to pay like my nieces and nephews, the oldest was 5. So I had 5 of them at the time, and like pay them like $1,000 each to like check off for the court that I like gave them this gift. And my lawyer was like, this seems like an appropriate amount. And then make a deal with my university, which was like the cheapest like endowment gift was a $5,000 bench, which I still haven't like gotten a bench because I was just like, I basically had to write $10,000 just to like fulfill these crazy wishes when Brad was drugged up on like whatever. Like, and this is
Oh my
how it
God.
started, was like the beginning of like, what the fuck is happening?
Oh my God.
Like, so, and I feel like I have to tell that story because just get someone to write your will that knows what they're doing.
Oh my
Like, don't
God.
just feel like you can write it and sign it. And we had like a friend was a notary. It was all like friends that did it. They were like, sure, you're dying, your husband's dying. Like, we'll do whatever we can to help. And it was not helpful. And then on top of that, the day after Brad died, his brother and sister, like, I'm like in bed and devastated and not knowing what to do. And they're like, let's just call the bank and we'll figure out. Cause again, Brad like I didn't know like what accounts had automatic payments for like our cable or our electricity bill. And I was like, I don't even know where to begin like with our finances. So they called the bank and explained the situation. Was like, can we just get like a list of everything? And I have access to the account. We could have gone online, but and I think they were just trying to help and not involve me. And the second they said that Brad had died, they locked down the account because apparently, which I didn't know, I wasn't a joint user. Like, I wasn't a joint account holder. I was just an authorized user on this account. So our checking account, like we had one checking account that we used together, and I had no access. So I had no access to money
Oh
after
my
he
God.
died, like literally nothing.
Oh my
And
God.
I had like another account in my name that had $0 in it because I was like, I've never used it. Like, since we got married, it was like we had one account together. And I had to borrow money for his memorial service to get him cremated. Like, I had to borrow money from a friend because I didn't have access to anything.
Oh
So my other
my
lesson is, don't call the bank until you know you are a joint account holder. And it
Holy shit.
like literally day one of being a widow was like, I don't have money. Like, I can't do anything. Like, and I had
Oh,
no other access to money at that point, which is just insane.
wow, that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, it's just like one of these things where it's like, you don't know, like, no one tells you these things. Like, there's no like manual of what to do and what not to do, which is why I think it's so important to talk about these things. Um, but I did eventually, so Brad did have life insurance. So eventually I was able to get that. I never got access. I had to open up a new account, never got access to our joint shared money again. It all went to the estate. And with the estate, you have to pay off any debts, which all of our money went to my attorney for the estate, like everything we had. So that's the thing with life insurance. There was always in the back of my mind, like, there's this pool of money here that, like you said, like this idea of security, like it just felt like on top of everything, it's there. But I felt like I couldn't spend it. I felt so guilty. And I was having a conversation with somebody over a DM on Instagram where it's like, it felt like blood money. Like, I was like, this isn't my money. I don't want to touch this money. Like, I don't know what to do with this money. Like, it felt like somehow having this money was betraying Brad in some weird way, even though he would have wanted me to have anything and everything he could have possibly done, but it was really hard. And so I really just didn't touch it for a long time. And I did take time and travel and stop working for several months after Brad had died. And I would like slowly take like little bits of that, like because it was in my savings account, to like live off of. And it took me until I bought this house I'm living in with the money, because we always had a dream of having a lake house. And it was the only thing that felt somewhat like, other than like starting a foundation in his name and doing some grand thing that I knew I was never going to do. Like, it felt like the best way to honor our life together and our dreams and have this place. Like, we didn't have kids and we adored our nieces and nephews and we're both very close with our siblings. And to have this place that like everyone forever, like even after I die and even while I'm still here, to have this place that everyone can come to and have this peaceful place was like the only way I could spend that money.
That's such a good way.
And I still feel horrible and so fucking privileged. And I don't feel privileged. I know I am privileged. And the idea of like how, like just figuring out finances, figuring out, you know, I had to switch jobs and do all of these different things. And I still work multiple jobs. And because I'm not relying on this money, that again, like if I had to sell this house, like I'd be fine. If I could go live with my mom, I could go live, I will never be on the streets. I have privilege like you do in all kinds of ways. But there's this idea, like I really felt like I had to figure it out without this money. And, you know, now I'm living in this beautiful house. So it still is like, that's a huge advantage that most people don't get, or certainly a lot of people don't get. And I recognize that. And I think about that every fucking day. And feel guilty about it all the time, because grief and loss and all of these things, it's not fair. There's no like line of like everyone gets at least this much. Like the situations, as you know, are so different.
Yeah.
And how was I lucky enough to like not have to worry about money in a way that other people do? And it's the same thing in life. And, you know, I felt that way before Brad died, of our privilege and, you know, our ability to earn money when we needed to. But it feels so present, like this idea of money and finances and survival and what's okay and what's not okay, and wanting to use this money to honor myself and my story and also Brad, and then also really fucking hating that money.
Yeah. I was thinking about the money that that is being given to me from Brian's gear that's being sold. It reminds me of that a little bit, except I think it's different in that it's not coming from like an insurance company, and it's not like something about that feels icky. I mean, it's not blood money, but I can totally see how it would feel like that. With the money from Brian's gear that's being sold, it's like a little bit more sadness and a longing. Like whenever he always gives it to me, not always, but like at least half the time he gives it to me in cash, because it's all like musicians like buying gear from each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it kind of like comes in, like he'll just like, you know, every once in a while he'll give me some more money, and yeah, it's like this sadness and longing of like what that represents. And sometimes the musicians that bought it will email me and be like, I bought this piece of gear off Bri, like it's so great, da 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 da, and I'm gonna use it for this and that and the other thing. And yeah, a couple
times. I love that like you get a little bit of that story of like where it goes, and
it makes me so sad though.
Yeah,
like it's this sort of like aching feeling of like, I just remember how excited Brian was to have all that gear and to buy it, and all of his dreams for using it. And it just feels so sad that he can't use it anymore.
And then it's selling it like piece by piece, where it's not like one big loss where you kind of accept it. It's like it's a constant, like every time something else is sold and you're given this money, it's just like another like stab to your heart, I'm sure, of you know, bringing it all back up again.
That's a major trigger for sure.
Yeah.
But also nice, like, because it also kind of feels like because it's coming in this weird way, it almost feels a little bit like he still has like an income, you know, contribution this month or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I'm sure it's going to end soon.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's nearing its end, but it's been really nice. But yeah, also strange. And I can see how life insurance would feel that way too, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know, and a lot of people that did send me messages to follow up with the poll, were saying that there's this perception that somehow it makes it okay, or the loss less, or, you know, and so many people were like, I would give this back in a second. Like, you know, not even for a life, but for a day. Like this idea that like it doesn't make up for them dying. And I'm like, I don't think anyone, like, do people outside of this world see that? And it was just like our own insecurities of, because we're so uncomfortable with like being handed anything because our person died. Like I think that's an uncomfortable thing. Yeah. Even if it's a blessing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine I can't imagine thinking that. I would never think that.
People were talking about like people coming out of the woodwork because like they assume they had life insurance, whether they did or not, that suddenly they have all this money and, asking for money or, wedding gifts or shower gifts or like trying to date them because they just assumed they were wealthy. And I'm like, is that a thing?
I know.
Like, is
I
that
read those
real?
comments too, and I was like, really? That sounds like a soap opera. Like, is that real?
Right. And I get, I think money does all kinds of crazy things to people.
You make such good points about these sort of, again, it's just like anything in grief. It's like all those parts of something that you don't see from the outside.
Yeah.
Until you're in that situation, right? Yeah. And then all those emotions and things come up that are so common. And
yeah. I mean, to be fair, I do think it would make it easier. Like, I think it adds an ease to this part of life. And I do want to acknowledge that, like, it doesn't make life easier. It doesn't make all the other parts of life and grief easier, but there is something about money that does help that piece,
Yeah.
Somebody else had also mentioned, for life insurance, it's not covering a lifetime of someone's income. It's like maybe a couple years of giving you, time. And that's for most, that's my understanding. It's like maybe a couple years of what they had. And some people maybe made enough or had enough life insurance where it's like they're suddenly set, but I don't think that's the majority of people, where it's like it gives them some time. And somebody was like, I have to had to do the math to count down of like what date this money will run out and then like figure it out. And so, I think there's still that same stress. You just get a little bit more time to not worry about it. Before then it's like, okay, fuck, now what am I going to do? Because I still don't have, you kind of assume you're going to have a second income for the remainder of your life with your partner.
Right. So, and you might have bought a certain house with that in mind, or.
Right. And I think that's such a good point, is like we live this lifestyle with these two incomes, and that's why so many people, going back to last week's conversation of having to move and do all of this stuff, because you live a life with the money that you have together. And when one of those is gone, when half of that's gone, or sometimes more than half of that's gone, it trickles down and changes all of these other aspects of our lives.
Totally. And then if it impacts where you're going to live, that's huge. And then if it impacts like decisions that you make about your own work and childcare and all of these things. It really
does. Like all of these pieces of your life are affected by the loss of this income.
Right. And like, for us to stay at our apartment in Toronto and pay what we were paying in rent for me on my own, like, I'm just like, even if I was making so much money, that is just too much for one person to pay in rent. Like, that's
how I felt too about the loft, where I was like, it just, even if I could, which I couldn't, I was like, this just is unreasonable for me on my own.
And it just, I don't want to.
I could put that money towards other things, towards travel experiences,
therapy. Right, exactly. Like, I don't want to live my life, so stressed about just where I'm living. Like, that's just, that doesn't sound enjoyable to me when I'm already like stressed out about other things,
Right. Exactly.
The thing about financial stress that I think, or just, I don't even want to say financial stress, although often it is, for me, it's more like financial change or discomfort or like just instability is what it really feels like. It impacts grief a lot, I find, because a lot of my grief is anxiety that comes up around myself and my life and Davida and our life together. And like, when you don't have financial security, it's just so easy to go into that downward spiral when you get anxious, when you get in those moments of like, I have nothing figured out. That's where my mind always goes in those moments when I'm stressed, is like, this is the huge part of my life that hasn't been figured out. And it feels hard. It feels stressful for sure, and impacts the rest of my grief.
Yeah, definitely. I think what a bunch of people said that I thought was really interesting, and I feel like I related to this a little bit, was this idea of, again, going back to like managing finances, maybe for the first time, and feeling like incompetent and insecure and like didn't want to ask questions because they felt kind of stupid because they're like, I don't know these things and I'm however old. And I read a statistic a couple weeks ago that said women are less likely to get help in like women widows, especially because of that feeling of like, I don't want to be looked down on. I don't know the questions to ask. I don't want to look like an idiot. And so they just don't. And, I think it's another reason why it's so important we talk about this in all of these different situations, because it's like, there's so many people in that situation that don't know what to ask. And so they don't ask. And then it ends up negatively affecting their life. And I know I felt that way so many times in the last 4 years. I mean, throughout the course of my life, but certainly as a widow, of trying to figure out all of these things on my own and being like, I feel stupid for asking this. Like, I feel like I should know this. And there's still like, this comes up regularly where I'm like, I don't even like, I feel like an idiot. And at some point, I think you just have to get over that and ask. But it's hard. That's really hard. And I don't think that's something that's ever talked about, is the idea of, if someone was managing or someone was mostly in charge of these things, and then suddenly you're like, what's an automatic payment? Like, I don't know, whatever, like things that maybe feel very obvious, but you don't know because you've never had to deal with it.
But didn't you do those things before you got together with Brad?
So I did. But I think for me, it was so simple. Like, my life and my finances were so simple. And then, we added a mortgage. So I feel like it got more complicated. And, Brad had student loans, and then I had medical bills. And so it was all of these different debts and things that were coming in that we had to manage that I had no idea how to do.
Right. Yeah, your finances sound much more complicated than ours were, because neither one of us had any debt. We'd both already paid off our student debt by the time we met, and we didn't have medical debt. And it's also, that's another thing that's so different in Canada. And didn't somebody ask us something about, do you have to pay the medical debt when your partner dies?
So we had a couple of people ask about not just medical, but like all debt. And I want to like tread very lightly on this and be like, I don't know for sure. And I think it varies in the United States based on state for a lot of these. Usually, I think that you are not, as an individual, required to pay your spouse's debt if it was just in his name. So if it's his medical bills, his student loans, and the student loans changed, I think in 2018, it was after Brad died, because this was like a huge part of my story too, was having to pay his student loans. I'm like, I didn't get $100,000 education. Like, that's not going to benefit me. I can't pay this. And they've since, I think they have switched where the spouse or parents do not have to continue paying that debt. But up until 2018, you did.
Wow.
You had to take on those loans. What I think it was my experience is that the debt collectors will still come and hound you and be like, this is going into collections. This is going to affect your credit. They will threaten you.
Oh my gosh.
They don't care. They don't care. And most people will pay them because they're being pushed into doing it. So I think it's like, it's so important to find somebody you trust to talk to, like for each of these things, medical bills, student loans, like, and then personal debt. And if there is an estate, usually you have an estate lawyer, and they're going to be your person that you're going to talk to, because again, the debt, if you have to pay, it comes out of the estate. So it's not your personal money. For me, that was very confusing, because I'm like, well, the estate is my personal money. This is literally the bank account you stole and locked down. And so they're like, but no, it's the, like, over and over, it's like, it's the estate money. I was like, that is my money. Like, there is no difference here. The estate is my house and this bank account that we had. So when it's like the estate takes care of it, I was like, for most people, the estate is like, it's what you had. But they're like, you don't have to personally pay. But it all feels the same. It all feels very personal. It's so complicated. It's so complicated. Like, there's so many different levels, and it's so depending on where you live.
Yeah, that's wild. When I think of sort of why financial stress is so difficult in widowhood, I think it's because it's a huge part of our loss, because money is a huge part of living in the world. And it is a thing that is often very shared, and one of the most shared, right? Like, you can have parts of your life that are more your own, but like for Brian and I, like, our money was very connected, and
same with Brian and I.
A team in that way. And like, even if your money isn't necessarily together in one bank account, like you have a situation like we were saying with a house and a mortgage and a rent and, you know, certain expenses and things you do that are set up reliant on whatever it is, whether you're both working or whether one of you is taking care of the kids and the other one is working, right? And it just, all of that balance just goes completely off, and you're grieving. And you're expected to like figure out like all that shit that you had to figure out, all these, you know, decisions that I've had to make about my company. And, you know, because I have a business partner who's still running it. But things have changed so much, and we had a balance between us, and so much has changed in that area. So it's just, it's a huge part of widowhood that is like very rarely talked about, honestly. Like we both spend a lot of time in the grief online world, and I feel like
I never see people talk about it. The amount of time having to call lenders, having to call the bank, having to get death certificates, having to pay taxes for your person. Like it doesn't just have
the taxes.
You know, taxes, even though they're dead. I'm like, you have to pay taxes? I'm like, 22 days in January, and I have to pay his taxes and all the things that come with that. And then I had to pay the estate had a separate tax whole thing. Like there's so many pieces.
Wow.
And I feel like this is just like the tip of the iceberg in this conversation. But like if I could leave with one thing, and I realize that pretty much everyone that watches this, it's too late for this little snippet of advice, but it's to like get this shit done before your person is sick and dead. Like, take these lessons. And for everyone that's watching, which are, you know, the vast majority of you guys are widows, very sorry. Most of you are in this pain with us.
It's true. And like, get a will, get life insurance, you know, get each other's passwords, all of that stuff.
Right? The passwords, every account, like your login, have a spreadsheet, have all of it in one place.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Lessons if we could go back in time.
If only we could go back in time.
Yeah.
Oh, for so many reasons.
I know, for all the reasons.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for sticking with us through the discomfort.
Yeah. And if you guys have follow-up questions, I feel like there's just like, we just opened the door a little bit. And
there's probably lots of different situations that we could never even imagine, because everyone's situation is so unique, you know, and even between us, like they're so different, right? Incredibly different and really hard, both in different ways. It just shows it's just another corner of the loss that's so complex, and
another isolating thing that we all deal with in different ways.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye. My fire is so hot.
Is it? Let's talk about money, and then you're sweating, taking it off.
Like derobing.
Right. Like it's this topic. It's not sex.
But sex, money. Oh my gosh.